You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another episode of Random Thoughts. Today I'm going to talk about why online debates are often useless. Now, that's not to say that they are always pointless. In fact, sometimes they can be pretty entertaining. I have had my minds changed because of things people have, convinced me of things. And I've changed some minds myself as well. Like, I'm not saying that they're always useless, always pointless, or anything like that. But I think largely they are. That's how you get, the whole debate bro things, right? Where people are like, oh, debate me, bro. It's like, no. Because it's never in good faith. Now, what spurred this idea for a video, as you may know if you saw the video I did with Corbin on his channel, which was actually like 20 minutes of me and then like 6 minutes of Corbin. It actually was a video that he recorded first, and then I edited, but I added in to it, and then I added in way more than he had. But anyway, if you've seen that video, then you know I had a bit of a back and forth with this guy named Captain Hardluck, who Corbin also had an argument with. And this isn't going to be entirely about him, but I am going to be using him as an example. Because Captain Hardluck is a good example of this, of why debates often don't accomplish anything. Because going into debates, a lot of the time, both sides already have their minds made up. You're not going to have your minds changed, especially when you're fundamentally viewing things through a completely and totally different lens. Like, you see the world entirely differently. And no matter how many times you try to explain it, you're not going to get through to each other. Or, if you do, you're going to realize that your differences can be irreconcilable. But another issue is, a lot of the time, it's not actually about trying to convince each other or trying to have a genuine conversation. It oftentimes devolves into trying to score points and make yourself seem smarter, cooler, and more like big tough guy, right? Hence, people use bad faith tactics. And that was my biggest problem with Hardluck, because I was actually having an interesting conversation with him at first. And it's funny, because he likes to bitch that we didn't take screenshots of our conversations, but by and large, a lot of the issues I had with him were through a voice conversation that we didn't record. And so I wouldn't really be able to screenshot those. But he also banned us from his server, and he banned me for literally nothing. I literally stopped arguing with him when I realized he was operating in bad faith. But he banned me just because I was associated with Corbin. It had nothing to fucking do with me. I hadn't done shit. But this motherfucker banned me. And granted, his server's a vanity server. He said so multiple times. It's basically just there to stroke his ego, and there's nothing inherently wrong with having a vanity server. But why the fuck would you have a debate tab? He put it in because of Corbin. But why bother putting in a debate tab if you can't handle that? Why bother putting it in if you have to have your server just be people who support you and want to basically stroke your cock? But the bad faith tactics that he used commonly were to make assumptions, make accusations, and then assume that he knows my thoughts when he clearly doesn't. For instance, the large issue that we were having was that we were arguing about abortion. And I'll do a whole video on abortion. Again, I've done a few, but I'm going to do another one spurred on by this. I actually have a few video ideas that were spurred on by this whole Hardluck situation. And again, it's not necessarily about him, but he made me think about some things that made me want to do these Random Thoughts videos. So obviously don't go out of your way to bother him. Whatever. He's not worth my time a lot of the time, honestly, because I realized that, first off, we're not going to get anywhere. And I made it pretty clear from the start, because what happened was we were talking about whether or not things are just fucked, right? And he kept saying that it was naive to think that things were fucked. And then he tried to insinuate that, enough backlash for, trans kid surgeries, that will have enough to actually cause people to make a difference and change things. And I'm like, who are you kidding? Look at abortion. Just like 10 years ago, what was the pro-choice, quote-unquote, stance? Safe, legal, rare, right? Again, I'm still against it. If you guys don't know, I am vehemently pro-life. I am, absolute when it comes to pro-life. Which, again, will lead me to a whole conversation about the value of human life, because that will be something that is important. And that's another thing. Hardluck kept calling us sociopaths, because, again, he has to resort to ad hominem. Look, I'm fine with insults. I am fine with insults. He can call me a sociopath. I don't mind if somebody who literally starts off a conversation with, The real conversation we should be having is prenatal or postnatal, not is it life. Anyone who's fucking that fucking gone when it comes to the fucking abortion thing, anyone who's that pro-abortion, that's their starting point. If they want to call me a sociopath, fucking, I don't care. Go right ahead. I'm the one who values life. But again, so that's the thing, is he kept calling us sociopaths and asserting that. Just really bad faith stuff. He also kept, again, trying to make it about religion because he knows that I have Christian views. He doesn't understand what my Christian views are, clearly, because he kept trying to make it about God, and I kept saying, I didn't mention God, move on, you know, stuff like that, because he kept trying to drag it back to that. Because when you're arguing from a religious standpoint, you can't really go on the logical angle, which is what I was going for. I wasn't going for the religious angle of it. I was going for the individual rights of the child. Had nothing to do with God. And he kept trying to bring it back to that. And, like I said, I don't want to go off too much about this because I'll do a whole video on the abortion thing at some point. But one of the things that made me realize just how bad faith he was he asked a question to Corbin, and I don't remember what the question was at this point. Like I said, it was so fucking long ago. And by so long ago, I think it was just a few weeks ago, probably a month or two. Honestly, I don't know. I'm bad with time. But it was probably like a month. I don't know. If I look at Corbin's channel, I can actually see when his video came out, so that'll give us some insight. Okay, Corbin's video was 2 weeks ago. I think it was only a few days before that, so 2, maybe 3 weeks ago tops. So I'm building it up to be longer ago than it was, but again, I'm bad with time, so forgive me. But the point is, this started as an open forum, right? Let's make that clear. Open conversation. We were all talking. And the abortion thing started with me and him. Now, I was at work. I wasn't at top form. I wasn't at my best when it came to my normal debating. Because the thing is, when it comes to debating, it's not really about actually, you know, whether or not you're right. It's about whether or not you can make a persuasive argument. And that comes down to skill, which admittedly I'm not the best at. I don't think I'm the worst by any stretch. But the thing is, you have to be able to use tactics. Now, you can use good faith tactics or bad faith tactics. And again, this is stemming from bad faith. But I'm going to stop beating around the bush, because when I realized he was bad faith was in a conversation between the three of us. He posed a question. Corbin didn't give him an answer, at least not one that was satisfactory to him. And I said, yeah, I'll answer it, yes. And then he's like, oh, that wasn't fucking directed at you. It's real easy to answer it when it's not directed at you. I see what you did there, fuck you. And it's like, what? What are you talking about? This literally started as a conversation between the three of us, and not to mention the whole abortion argument started with the two of us, so what the fuck are you on about? Like, saying it's easier. How the fuck is it easier to answer if it's not directed at me? It's still a question. Like, a question doesn't magically become easier to answer whether or not it's directed at me. Like, you could argue that maybe it would put more pressure because I was on the spot, but that's not how I function. Like, sure, I can get caught up on things, and again, I was at work. I wasn't in top form. I had to constantly mute my mic because I was doing shit at work. So I couldn't chime in as much as I wanted to. So maybe because I'd been quiet for a minute, that gave him the need to feel like he could fucking take a high ground and act like I was somehow in the wrong for answering a fucking question he posed in a three-way open conversation. Not to mention, this motherfucker kept screaming at me. He kept yelling and getting, like, really angry. Like, it's insane to me just how fucking emotional he was. And I'm willing to bet, because maybe somehow this issue hits close to home, like, I bet you he has a relative or friend that had an abortion or something like that. I don't know, but that's probably why he got so heated on it, because obviously that could hit close to home, and clearly he was coming from a position of emotion, whether or not he likes to acknowledge it. And I mean, granted, there's emotional elements to all of it for all of us, I suppose. But I'm coming at it primarily from what I consider to be an ethical and logical standpoint. But for instance, another thing that I realized in retrospect was bad faith was another conversation, or debate, if you want to call it that I had with him was on copyright. Now, he's an artist, he writes a comic, he's also making a video game or something. He's doing a couple of different projects. And so, naturally, as you can expect, he is a lot more pro-copyright than I am. As you guys know, I'm not very pro-copyright, to say the least. I don't really like the concept of intellectual property, just in general. So he started off making the assumption that I didn't understand copyright law. And I do. But that's irrelevant when I'm making an ethical argument. You know what I mean? Like, he kept making it a semantic argument, right? So, for instance, he kept saying that you can't just copyright an idea. And I said, yeah, that's true. You can't just copyright a vague idea. And he's like, no, it's not that it's vague, it's that it's expressed. So he kept obsessing over whether or not the idea is expressed. And I mean, in the most technical, literal, boil it down to the very bottom sense, he's technically sort of correct. Like, the second you write something down, that's your copyrighted material. That is technically true by law. But here's the thing. Good fucking luck enforcing it if you write down a story that says, I don't know, a guy goes on a quest with a sword. And let's say you wrote this back in, like, 1973. And then The Legend of Zelda comes out. You can't very well go out of your way and say, oh, they stole my idea, because it's too vague. That's the point I was making. The idea has to be specific. You can't just copyright a vague concept. You can try. I guess if someone took your words verbatim and posted them just verbatim, you could argue it's plagiarism, although with how vague that specific one is, that might be a little bit harder to argue. But the point is, I was trying to make is, it's a vague concept, and he kept saying, no, expressed. I'm like, look, I know what you're saying, but you can't really enforce a copyright on a vague concept. And he got really angry about that and started chimping out, going totally nuts. And again, like, there were several little arguments I had, both on voice call and on text with him. But the point is, I realized he was operating in bad faith. He just wanted to score points and stroke his own ego and look cool in front of Hybrid. Like, that's ultimately what it came down to, right? So he would make assumptions and make claims. And he would obsess over it, right? Because one thing he would constantly do is say that Corbin and I were not seeing nuance. And he would also say that we were giving ultimatums and being absolutists. So when he would pose a question, and then we would answer it in a nuanced way, he would be like, that wasn't the answer to my question, yes or no, giving ultimatums. Which is ironic, given that he kept getting on us for being absolutist and giving ultimatums and not seeing nuance. He just kept obsessing over definitions of things when he was arguing with Corbin. Corbin would say, well, that's not what I mean when I say this. And in bad faith, he would be like, well, that is the definition, and that is what you mean, fuck you. It's like, no, we've defined our terms, move on, stop trying to claim that's what I mean when it's not what I mean. And by I mean Corbin in this instance. It's funny, because I actually caught him on that, because he didn't realize what tangible meant. He thought that IP was tangible, which it's literally not, because tangible literally just means perceptive by touch. Like, you're able to touch it. And like I said, he likes to throw sociopath around a lot. He did a video on, like, this guy who's, like, funding a bootleg DVD thing, which, yeah, it's piracy, and it's paying for piracy, which, you know, he's right in the substance of what he's saying. I think he's far too angry about it, personally. I don't think it's a big deal, but that's just because I'm not the biggest copyright guy. But I do think it is funny that he uses the word sociopath at least 10 times in that video. Like, he seems to think because you don't empathize with a specific thing, then that means that you're not capable of feeling empathy, which I think is absolutely fucking retarded. But, yeah, a lot of debates devolve into just shouting matches back and forth. Another problem with debates that you run into is people will be like, well, I have this study that says this, and then someone will shoot back, well, I have a study that says this. And then it really just devolves into a battle of which sources which person finds reliable. Because all sources are biased. I mean, that's true. Like, you can use data. Data is important to use. That is actually an issue that I think Corbin did a pretty massive fuck-up on when arguing with him. Because Corbin said that he didn't deal in statistics, and I think to say that as a blanket statement is a terrible idea, because statistics are absolutely necessary in some aspects of life. And they are effective at arguing points. Like, statistics, like, where the hell else are you going to go? Like, I also do think that, you know, observations and just rational thought do go into it as well, but statistics are important to have empirical evidence. And, you know, Corbin does now kind of see that maybe he spoke a little too absolutist on that, because I do think that statistics are important, but I think when it just becomes a battle of, well, this study versus this study versus this study, it's not really effective. Like, you're not going to get anywhere, because it's just arguing. It's basically appeal to authority versus appeal to authority at that point. Now, let me be perfectly clear. Hard Luck and I did not argue in this regard. This is not something that came up with me or Hard Luck. He did bring up statistics, and Corbin just denied the concept of statistics, which, again, Corbin realizes that was a fuck-up. But the point is, like I said, this is broader than hard luck. I'm talking about debates as a whole. So when I'm talking about this studies versus study, that has nothing to do with hard luck. None of that happened. That wasn't an argument we had. And, there can be even some fun in internet blood sport where you're watching someone who's an effective debater just effectively destroy someone who's a bad debater. Even in bad faith, it can be entertaining to watch. But at the end of the day, it's not going to change any minds, and it's not going to really gain you any favors. It's just going to score you points for your team, effectively. And I think that's probably not the best goal to have when you're supposedly having a deep philosophical, political, or just kind of, idea discussion. For instance, there's that debate that Alex Jones had with Destiny, where the two just started screaming at each other, and, it wasn't really watchable. I couldn't sit through it. And so a lot of the time, I find that these debates are pointless online. Now, again, there are some that have their place. There are times that minds have been changed. But it's few and far between in comparison. Whenever someone's just like, oh, debate me, I'm just like, no, I see no point. And that's the thing. I will debate with friends, and I'll debate with people that I know are going to respect me, and I'll respect them enough that neither of us are going to operate in bad faith. We're both going to actually be we understand each other's mindsets, or if we don't, we will ask for clarification, rather than just being a piece of shit and saying, no, you believe this, fuck you, just admit this, I'm making an accusation, why won't you answer it? Shit like that just drives me up the fucking wall. For instance, I debate and argue with my friend Theron all the time, and believe it or not, we don't agree on a lot of things. In fact, Theron disagrees with me on quite a few things. Because, I'd call myself right-wing. There's no denying that, obviously. But Theron, he's centrist, center-left. He disagrees with me on a lot of things, fundamentally. But we respect each other, and we actually, have interesting conversations where we make each other think. I'll bring up a point, and he'll actually have to think about it, and vice versa. He'll bring up a point, and I'll actually have to think about it. That's the thing that happens. And with Corbin, believe it or not, Corbin and I argue all the time, too. Not as much as we used to, because we're a lot more similar now than we used to be. But we still disagree on quite a few things. Now, granted, sometimes when I'm in an argument with multiple people, I'll sort of play devil's advocate and help Corbin argue his point better than he can, because Corbin's not the most tactful or eloquent when he talks. He's just very straightforward and doesn't think it needs to be justified, which I can respect. But if you're having an argument, that's often also not going to be effective. Now, granted, when Corbin and I are having a discussion, we understand each other. We understand our, each other's way of speaking, our mannerisms, and our thought processes. So it's a lot easier to communicate that way. Corbin and I, when we're arguing back and forth, we both have to think. We both actually are good at making our points. And, we'll criticize each other too, which I think is completely and totally fair. And again, I'm not above insults. I just think when that devolves into all you're doing, that also becomes a problem. Because then it's oh, okay, well then you have no interest in arguing. And again, I'm certainly not above it. I've insulted Hybrid plenty of times when I've argued with him. And like I said, I like Hybrid. In fact, I've been a lot nicer to Hybrid the last little bit because I've gained some respect for him, because I realize Hybrid put up with a lot from me. And, Hybrid is, he's a nice guy. I just think he's ill-informed, to say the least. I think he's ignorant on a lot of things. He's also just kind of special and constantly contradicts himself, but, that's part of the fun with Hybrid. Hybrid likes to stir the shit. That's one thing that made me like him a lot more, is he likes to kind of stir up trouble. He kept egging on Hard Luck and me and stuff in this stuff, it's really funny. He kept trying to drag it back out into the open when it was more or less over. But like I said, Hybrid's a cool guy. I realized I was probably too harsh on him, which is why I've mellowed out a lot more, and we've gone back more to the kinds of conversations we had at the beginning. I think Hybrid knows at this point that we're not going to agree on abortion, so I think we can just take that one as a given and move on, which is something I respect about Hybrid more than Hard Luck, because Hard Luck wouldn't do that. And it's funny, Hard Luck kept insisting that he had planted a seed in our heads and that it was going to grow into an idea and make us question things. It's no, it fucking didn't. I went into it thinking the exact same thing. I came out of it thinking the exact same shit that I was thinking when I went into the argument. You accomplish nothing. I award you no points. You lose. Good day, sir. Like I said, it wasn't productive, and that's why I actually tried to avoid it, because I knew we weren't going to get anywhere. I said, oh, okay, then we're not going to find common ground. Which just shows just how fucked we are, because I'm a pretty cynical guy. I'm fairly jaded. I want to do a video on cynicism as well, but I'm also going to talk about the comedian when I do that. So, obviously, I have a very cynical outlook on the world. I'm not full-on black-pilled, but I definitely don't have a ton of hope for people. I have some hope. Like, there's always some. And I think it's good to try and have hope. But there are definitely problems we run into, and I do have to be realistic about it, and that does tend to some doom and gloom thoughts over time. And that's why I just don't think, a lot of the times debating is productive. Like, I'll talk about deep philosophical stuff with my close family and friends, as I said. My brothers and I have argued about plenty of things, too. There's plenty of people in the real world I'm much more willing to have one of these arguments or discussions with. Because in the real world, it's a little bit different. When you're just online, just trying to score points, it's, like I said, it can be entertaining, but it's not going to fucking accomplish anything. And it's like, okay, like, if you're better at rhetoric, then you win the debate, but, like, really does that accomplish anything? Like I said, it occasionally changes minds, but it's rare. Like, a lot of these debates are just unproductive shouting matches that devolve into ad hominem, bad faith attacks, and just they're not good. They're not productive. Like I said, like with Hard Luck, he kept wanting to redefine Corbyn's terms. And it's funny, because, like, he's just going dictionary definition, and it's like, yeah, okay, fair enough, I get what you're trying to do. But that's clearly not what he meant when he said that, so maybe fucking just deal with it and move on, now that you understand each other's terms. Instead of obsessing over the semantics and making it an argument about the definitions of shit, when it's like, okay, I get it, let's move the fuck on. I get it. Definitions are important. Leftists will do all sorts of shit where they redefine words, and that causes a lot of problems. And they do that very intentionally to fuck with the rhetoric. That's why I think it's important, if you're having a good faith debate, to define terms. Another thing he did, when he banned us from his server, he referred to both of us as Nazis, which I think is ridiculous, because I'm not. Like, it's just like, it's the buzzword that they always devolve into, right? That's the thing, is like, he also called us fascists, and I'll have a screenshot. Here's a screenshot of him calling us fascists. There you go. You want screenshots, buddy? There's one I could get. It's funny, too, because he said that in response to Corbyn posting a fake comment, claiming that his own video was some schizo shit, which is really funny. And then Hard Luck just calls us both fascists, which, if you know anything about me, I'm pretty fucking libertarian. Like, my views are libertarian in a lot of extreme ways, where idealistically I'd call myself an ANCAP, but realistically maybe just a libertarian. Because, there's a difference between the ideal and what is realistically accomplishable, or, like, what is realistic within a society of a certain size. But yeah, of course, he just goes into the leftist buzzword talk, which, Hard Luck supposedly isn't, like, hardcore leftist anymore. He used to run in a lot of those circles, which, believe it or not, so did I. Like, high school and early college, I had some leftist views. I'm obviously a lot more right-wing now, and I would say that, leftists would call me far-right because, I'm pretty fucking libertarian. I'm very much in favor of traditional gender roles. I have a lot of conservative values, too. I'm Christian, not maybe in the traditional sense. I've got my own sort of Christian views. And I've got some objectivist thoughts, too. Like I said, I kind of borrow from multiple philosophies because I just kind of go with what makes sense to me, which was another point of contention with Hard Luck, because he kept saying my views were inconsistent. But none of the things I said contradicted the other things I said. It's just I don't stick wholesale to one ideology because I think that's retarded, and that's how you end up in a cult, basically, right? Like, that's how you end up in an echo chamber, is if you just agree with everything an ideology says. Because I think it's impossible to find an ideology that you're going to agree with everything, if you're being honest. But that's the problem, is people want to commit to that ideology, and, like, that's just obsessive with people in this current day and age. But yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, I don't think a lot of these debates really accomplish anything, which is why I don't really do them all that much. There are times when there is an argument that I do feel like I want to get involved. And again, with Hard Luck specifically, and again, this isn't completely about him, but he is like the most prime example I'm using because he was what spurred me into wanting to make this video, so I'm not going to deny that that's obviously a factor. But he seemed like a cool guy at first. We seemed to have actual arguments and discussions. Even with the copyright thing, I noticed there was a couple of little things that I'm like, that's a little disingenuous, but I let it slide. But then, like, after the whole abortion debate and a few others, I'm just like, no, this guy is full of shit. And like I said, you want more details on that? There's a whole video on Corbyn's channel that I did with him that goes more into that a little bit about Hard Luck himself. But these debates, they're just fucking. Let's score some points. Let's humiliate the other guy, and it's like, sure, that's fun for like an internet blood sports sort of thing, but again, it's not a real debate. It's not productive. But I've rambled on. I think you get my fucking point. Most debates nowadays are bad faith. It is just scoring points for your team. And there are exceptions, and there are times where it's effective. But again, just thought I'd go into that. And anyway, this has been Fugitive Red Eye. Have a good one. Toodles.
Subscribe the Fugitive Red Eye.